The fall of Earth asterisk. The sky was on fire. Buildings fell like toy blocks. People screamed and ran in every direction. Earth was no longer safe. It all happened so fast. One moment Mason was enjoying a normal day at the base. The next moment, alarms screamed and the sky turned red. Alien ships came through the clouds like shadows with burning eyes. They didn't ask questions, they just attacked. Lasers cut through the streets, turning soldiers to ash. Mason ran, but he didn't know where to go. His training told him to find shelter, to regroup. But there was no one left to regroup with. The war was over before it even began. And humans had lost. Mason saw one of the science bunkers nearby. He remembered it from past briefings. It was made deep under the ground, strong and hidden. He sprinted toward it, ducking behind wreckage and smoke. When he reached the thick door, it was already half open. He didn't care who was inside. He just wanted to live inside. It was dark and cold. He slammed the door shut and locked it. The noise outside faded, replaced by silence and his heavy breathing. He fell to his knees, confused and afraid. He thought he was alone, but he was wrong. From the shadows, a soft voice spoke. "Who are you?" Mason jumped, reaching for his sidearm. A tall figure stepped into the faint light. Blue skin, long silver hair, and glowing violet eyes. It was an alien, a female. She looked calm, not angry. Mason stared, unsure what to do. She didn't move, just watched him carefully. "I'm not here to fight," she said softly. "I was already here when the attack began." Her name was Alira, a prisoner held in this bunker for research now. Like Mason, she was trapped 2 days past. They didn't speak much at first. Mason kept his distance, still filled with fear and confusion. Alira sat quietly in the corner, never trying to harm him. Food was limited, just a few protein bars and water bottles. The generator was running low on power. Lights flickered often. They both knew they couldn't stay for long, but the surface was a death zone. Radiation, ash, and enemy patrols made escape impossible. Mason's strength started to fade without proper food. He grew weaker, slower, colder. Alira noticed, and one night she finally spoke again. "My kind. We are different," she whispered. "Our bodies can adapt, even nourish others." Mason blinked, not understanding. Then she explained. Her body produced a fluid, rich with energy and nutrients. It was how her species helped their young, and wounded. She offered it to Mason, carefully and with no pressure. He was shocked, unsure if he should trust her. But he had no choice. He was starving, so he accepted, feeling strange and guilty. But when he drank, something changed inside him. Warmth returned to his body. Strength returned to his limbs. His mind became clearer, but his heart became confused. He didn't feel like a soldier anymore. Not when she looked at him like that, with calm eyes and no judgment. They started speaking more, learning about each other. Alira told him about her world, her people, how they were pushed into war by fear. Just like humans, she was trained to hate humans, but she didn't hate Mason. And Mason didn't know what to feel anymore. The bunker felt less cold when they were close. They shared food, light, stories, and long moments of silence. It was a strange peace in the middle of destruction. But they both knew this peace couldn't last. Something was moving in the air vents. They heard scratching and soft hissing. Strange sounds echoed through the empty halls. The bunker was not safe anymore. Mason and Alira stood side by side, facing the darkness. He no longer saw her as the enemy, and she no longer feared him. In a broken world, 2 lost souls had found each other, and now they would fight together. No matter what came through those shadows, hunger and trust. Mason woke up shaking. His stomach growled, but it wasn't hunger this time, it was fear. He had dreamed of fire again, cities burning, people screaming, and him standing alone. But when he opened his eyes, the soft hum of the bunker lights reminded him he wasn't alone. Alira was there, sitting beside the broken terminal, watching the screen blink slowly. She hadn't slept again. Her glowing eyes didn't show tiredness, only focus. He didn't know how she did it. But she was stronger than he expected, not just in body, but in mind too. Mason tried to stand but nearly collapsed. She caught him quickly, her hand on his chest. "Easy," she said, her voice calm like flowing water. "You've gone too long." Without nourishment, he looked away, ashamed. The last time she helped him, it had felt strange but necessary. Now it felt personal. But he nodded slowly, accepting. Alira moved gently, with care and silence. She didn't treat him like a weak creature, but like someone worth saving, and in return, Mason started to see her differently too, after he regained strength. He started working. There were broken lights in the hallway and dead air filters near the sleeping pods. Mason used his tools, simple and worn, to repair what he could. Alira followed him, helping when she understood what needed doing. Sometimes they didn't speak for hours. Sometimes they laughed quietly, like two people who had lived in the dark for too long and just found each other. Alira told him about her planet Azarian, a place of green skies and glowing forests. She told him about the war, how her people were pushed into fighting after humans invaded their space. Mason listened, surprised. He had never heard that side of the story before. To him, aliens were always the enemy, but Alira didn't feel like an enemy now. One evening, while Mason was adjusting a power cell near the generator, he cut his hand. The wound was small, but deep. He hissed in pain, and Alira rushed over. Without asking, she placed her hand over the wound. A soft light glowed from her palm, and the bleeding stopped. The skin stitched itself slowly under her touch. Mason stared in awe. "Your body. It heals," he whispered. "It shares life," she answered, not proudly, just honestly. She sat beside him after that, quiet, thoughtful. They didn't speak much for the rest of the night, but something between them had shifted as more days passed. The bunker started showing signs of breakdown. The oxygen levels dropped slightly, enough to make breathing a little harder. The main comm system refused to turn on, and strange echoes still haunted the vents above. Sometimes Mason swore he saw movement in the shadows of the far corridor. Alira noticed too, her body tense, her ears sharp. "We're not alone down here," she said quietly one night. Mason believed her, but he wasn't afraid, not like before. Because now, when he looked at her, he saw someone who had already saved him. More than once, he started leaving messages in a notebook. In case something happened to him, he wanted someone to know what she had done. How she chose mercy over mission. How she protected him, even when she didn't have to. Alira found the notebook once, but didn't say anything. She simply closed it, gently, and placed it back. But her eyes were soft when she looked at him after that, like she knew what he had written, and it meant something. One night, as the lights dimmed again, Mason asked her a question. "Why didn't you leave when the door was still open?" She looked at him for a long time, then answered, "Because I saw something here I didn't know existed." He asked what, and she said, "A reason not to run." That night, the scratching in the vents returned, louder this time, and this time, they both stood up, side by side, ready to fight together. No longer strangers, no longer enemies, just two souls trying to survive in a world that had forgotten them. The bunker is breached. The air turned heavy, not just because of the pressure in the bunker, but something deeper, a feeling like the walls were listening, like the silence wasn't really silence anymore. Alira stood near the entrance hall, unmoving, her glowing eyes fixed on the shadows. Mason watched her from the workbench, sensing the same thing. A cold, invisible hand crawled over his skin. Then it came, a sound not loud, but sharp metal groaning, followed by a faint scraping noise. It wasn't inside the vents anymore. It was right outside the main door. Mason grabbed the old rifle he kept near his bed. It was low on charge, and the battery flickered weakly. Still, it was better than nothing. Alira stepped beside him without a word. Her face was calm, but her muscles tensed like a wild animal ready to protect. The door rattled once, then again, harder, then silence, then boom. A section of the outer frame dented inward. Mason aimed his rifle, and Alira raised her hand, a glow forming in her palm. Then the metal burst open with a shriek, and a creature fell through. It was not human, and not fully alien either. Its skin was gray and cracked. Parts of armor fused into its body. Its face was melted, twisted, its eyes glowing red like fire behind smoke. It let out a growl like pain turned into sound. It rushed forward with claws scraping the ground. Mason fired, the blast hitting its side, slowing it down, but not stopping it. The creature leapt toward him, but Alira moved faster. She struck it with a force Mason didn't know she had, sending it crashing into the wall. It stood again, growling louder, and charged toward her. This time, Alira didn't hesitate. She released a pulse from her chest, a wave of light that slammed into the creature. It screamed, twitching, and fell, twitching and gasping. Mason rushed forward, rifle ready, but Alira stopped him. "It's not just attacking," she whispered. "It's suffering." They stared at the creature as it slowly died. Its body flickered like a failing machine, wires, bones, and strange fluids mixed in a horrifying design. Mason realized what it was. A failed experiment, maybe once a human, maybe once an alien. Now something broken, created by force. Not nature. "What is it?" Mason asked. Alira knelt beside the body, touching its cold skin. "My people call them the spliced," she said. They were created during the first phase of the war test subjects. Stolen from both sides. Her voice cracked for the first time. "I thought they were all destroyed." Mason felt sick. He had seen classified files in the past, but no details. Now the truth lay dead before him. A secret buried in steel and silence. "How did it find us?" he asked. "They can smell energy," Alira replied, "and fear. They had to move fast. If one creature found them, more could follow." Mason and Alira began sealing off the tunnels deeper into the bunker. They used anything they could find: broken furniture, steel plates, even parts from the destroyed creature. Alira guided him, her memory of the bunker's design more accurate than any map. While working, Mason noticed her hand trembling. He stopped and gently touched her shoulder. "You saved me again," he said. Alira looked away, then quietly said, "You don't understand, Mason. This is just the beginning." That night, Mason couldn't sleep. He sat near the dying fire core, staring at his hands. Hands that used to fight aliens without thinking. Hands that now held tools to protect one. He thought about the creature, about what humans and aliens had done. Maybe they weren't so different after all. Maybe cruelty didn't care about species. He glanced at Alira, who was finally resting. Even in sleep, she looked alert, ready to fight, ready to protect. And he realized something. He didn't want to survive just for himself anymore. He wanted to survive for her too. The next morning, the alarms returned, this time not from the creature, but from the old terminal Alira had fixed. A signal had been detected: weak, broken, but real. Mason looked at her. Another survivor, maybe. But something in Alira's eyes said she wasn't sure. "We're not the only ones left," she said. "But not all survivors are friendly. Secrets in the dark." The message played on a loop. A voicemail, human, broken by static calling. "For help, please, if anyone hears this. Coordinates, trapped. Food running out." The signal repeated again and again. Mason stared at the monitor, fists clenched. That voice sounded familiar, but the system didn't show who sent it. Just a location, not far from the bunker. Maybe 5 kilometers away. Alira stood behind him, silent. Her eyes locked on the screen. Her face didn't show hope, only caution. "That signal is bait," she said quietly. "I've seen this trick before." Mason didn't answer. He wanted to believe someone else had survived. He wanted to believe they weren't the last 2 souls left under the sky. But a voice in his head whispered Alira might be right. He remembered the creature that attacked them, the spliced, part human, part machine, part alien. Someone had made that thing, and if they could make one, they could send many. Still, He couldn't stop thinking about the voice, about the chance, however small, that a real human needed help. That night, Mason searched the bunker's files, not the basic ones, but the hidden folders, locked under multiple layers. Elira had shown him a backdoor code she found during her own time trapped there. Together, they unlocked the truth, and what they found made Mason sick to his stomach. Years before the war, Earth's top secret programs had captured alien life forms, Elira's kind included. They were brought to places like this bunker for study, for weapon testing. Elira's name was on one of the files, captured, labeled, measured, not as a person, but as Subject Delta 3. Mason's hands shook as he read the cold reports. He looked over at her. Elira stood still, eyes closed, breathing slow. She already knew, she had lived it, and yet she never blamed him. He couldn't understand how she could look at him without hate. He asked her that finally. Elira opened her eyes and said, "Because hate is what started this war, Mason. If I keep it inside me, I become no better than the ones who locked me here." Mason didn't know what to say, so he just sat beside her in silence. It was strange how quiet moments in the bunker had become more powerful than any battle. Two enemies turned survivors, sharing stories instead of bullets. But even peace has limits, and the signal outside was still calling. Mason wanted to leave and check it. Elira didn't stop him. Instead, she handed him a small metal rod, shaped like a key. "If I don't come back, lock the door behind you," he said. But Elira replied, "I'll follow whether you want me to or not." They packed supplies, oxygen units, and small energy weapons. Elira placed her hand on the outer door, feeling it vibrate slightly. "The spliced can smell you," she warned. "But they'll smell me more." "Why?" Mason asked. "Because they're made from what was taken from us," she whispered. He didn't ask more, but the thought haunted him. What kind of science could twist life like that? What kind of war needed monsters to win? As they walked through the cracked underground tunnels, lights flickered above. The path was quiet, too quiet, until Elira stopped suddenly. She placed her hand against a side wall, then pressed something. Hidden, a small panel slid open. Inside were old files. Photos, even videos, experiments, all done in secret. One of the recordings showed Elira, younger, locked in a glass cell. Scientists talking like she wasn't even there. She didn't flinch watching it, but Mason looked away. He couldn't bear it. "Why show me this?" he asked. Elira replied, "So you'll know what's truly out there before you decide to save it." They continued moving, hearts heavier than their gear, and when they reached the surface access shaft, Mason paused. The world above was quiet, dark, and covered in dust, but something about it felt wrong. He looked at Elira, who nodded. "I'll go first," she said, and climbed without fear. Mason followed, one hand on the ladder, the other on his weapon. They were no longer just surviving. They were chasing shadows, ghosts, and maybe truths too painful to carry. But Mason knew one thing now. The enemy was never simple, and the line between human and monster was thinner than he ever imagined. The outside calls, ash fell like snow, slow, soft, and deadly. The sky above was no longer blue. It was gray and lifeless, filled with smoke and silent lightning. Mason had never seen Earth like this. What used to be home was now a graveyard. And yet, he walked forward, his breath short inside the filter mask. Elira walked beside him, unaffected, her skin glowing slightly in the broken light. Her kind could breathe in this. But Mason couldn't last long. They didn't speak much. Words felt too heavy for a world this empty. The signal came from the west, through a collapsed metro station and past twisted ruins. Once, this place had life, markets, music, children playing on corners. Now it was a maze of burned cars, shattered glass, and shadows that didn't feel empty. Every few minutes, Mason checked the old handheld tracker. The signal was still active, faint, but real. Elira watched every movement, her eyes scanning the wreckage like a predator. "We're being watched," she said finally. Mason tensed but nodded. He had felt it too. Since the moment they climbed out of the ground, The silence wasn't natural, it was waiting. They reached the location marked on the map, an old subway. Control room, half buried under a fallen building. Mason climbed through the cracked window. Gun ready, Illyra followed with ease, her feet silent on the broken floor. Inside, it was dark. But not empty. Old computers still blinked, barely alive. And someone or something was sitting in the corner, covered in a torn blanket. "Hello." Mason called out, voice steady. The figure didn't move. He stepped closer, eyes locked on the lump of cloth. "Illyra, scan," he said quietly. She knelt down, touched the ground, and her eyes widened. "It's not human," she whispered. "Back away." Too late, the figure lunged. Ripping off the blanket, it wasn't a survivor. It was another spliced, more advanced, faster, armored. Mason fired, the blast pushing it back. Illyra moved, in using her energy pulse to knock it off balance. But the creature was strong. Smarter than the last one, it dodged, growled, and slashed with metal claws. Mason was thrown across the room, hitting the wall hard. Illyra fought with all her strength, her hands glowing bright. She struck the creature's chest, but it didn't stop. Only when Mason crawled to the power panel and overloaded it did the surge disable the monster. Electricity flooded the floor, and the spliced convulsed before going still. Breathing hard, Mason sat on the floor, blood on his forehead. Illyra knelt beside him, checking his wounds. "You're hurt," she said, voice trembling. "Nothing." "Serious," he replied. Though his vision blurred, Illyra placed her hand over his chest, and again, that warmth returned. Her body glowed, and his pain faded. He looked into her eyes and saw fear, not for herself, but for him. In that moment, he realized something deeper. This wasn't just survival anymore. She wasn't helping him out of duty, she cared, and so did he. After some time, Mason stood again, sore but steady. They examined the spliced body and found something shocking. Inside its chest, embedded in the machine core, was a tracker human-made. Mason stared at the mark on the chip. It was from Earth's military labs, from the same program that created Illyra's prison. "They're still alive," he whispered. Illyra nodded slowly. "And they're still making weapons." The signal had been a trap, a lure, just as Illyra feared, not for humans, but for her. They wanted her captured again, maybe her DNA, maybe her power. Mason clenched his fists. This war, it's still going on, underground. "Not just underground," she said. "Inside people." They had to return to the bunker. They had no choice. Whatever was out there, it was watching them, hunting them. And now it knew exactly where they were going. As they moved back through the rubble, Mason looked at Illyra. "I won't let them take you," he said. "You might not have a choice," she replied, her voice quiet, but her hand touched his arm, softly, and in that small gesture, a promise passed between them, unspoken, but unbreakable. Together, they walked through the dead city, not just survivors, but warriors now. And the real war was just beginning, escape or stay. The bunker smelled like burnt metal and fear. They had barely made it back. Mason's side was bleeding again. Illyra's energy was low. The last creature had followed them all the way to the blast door. They only escaped because Illyra triggered the emergency gate just in time. Now the bunker was sealed, but not safe. The lights flickered more than ever. The air felt heavier. Something had changed since they left. The silence was different, watchful, waiting. Mason leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Illyra crouched beside him, placing her hand on his wound again. The glow from her skin was weaker than before. Her body had limits, and Mason hated seeing her like this, tired, drained, still trying to protect him. "You should rest," he said. But Illyra only shook her head. "We don't have time." They made their way back to the control room. Mason opened the systems panel and stared at the flickering map. Red markers had started blinking inside the lower tunnels. The spliced were here, inside. Somehow, they had found another way in. Mason slammed his fist against the console. "We can't hold this place." Illyra didn't argue. Instead, she reached into the supply locker and pulled out a small black device. Mason stared at it, confused. That's a distress beacon, she nodded. It belongs to my ship, she said softly. It's hidden in the mountains 3 clicks from here. Mason stared at her, realization flooding him. You had a ship this whole time, a broken one. She replied, the beacon only activates once. Mason's voice dropped. You could have escaped without me. Alira looked at him for a long moment. I could have, she whispered, but I didn't want to. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sirens buzzed faintly in the background, and the bunker's walls groaned again. Then Alira said something Mason never expected. I can fly it, just barely. But it won't take both of us. He blinked. What do you mean? It's too small, damaged. Power barely works. Maybe one pod is stable, she said, her voice low. You'll have a chance to live if you take it. Mason stood frozen, heart pounding. You want me to leave you, Alira's expression didn't change, but her voice cracked. I want you to live. He took a step back, shaking his head. No, I'm not leaving you behind. Not after everything. Mason. No, he said again, louder this time. I'd rather die with you than live without you. For the first time, Alira stepped closer, her hand touching his chest gently. Her eyes were soft, full of pain and something deeper. You've already changed me, she whispered. You gave me something my people couldn't choose. He took her hand and held it tightly. Then let's choose together. They knew what they had to do. Not run, not hide, but fight. Alira helped Mason build Trap's old wiring. Explosive charges, motion sensors pulled from broken drones. He rewired the generator to overload if triggered from the main hallway. They didn't have much, but they had each other, and they had a reason now, not just to survive, but to protect. Something real, a connection built in the darkness, stronger than war, stronger than fear. As night came, the first sound of footsteps echoed through the lower corridor. Not one, but many. The spliced were here. Dozens, maybe more. Mason looked at Alira one last time. She stood tall, her energy glowing faintly, but her eyes burned with fire. This is our home now, she said. Mason nodded, raising his weapon. Let them come. The final battle had begun. Not between human and alien, but between life and destruction. And in that bunker, beneath the ashes of a broken earth, 2 hearts burned together, refusing to be erased. New beginning. Asterisk smoke filled the air. The bunker walls were cracked and glowing with heat. Alarms had died hours ago, replaced by silence and the soft buzzing of dying power cells. Bodies of the spliced lay scattered across the main corridor, some half machine, some still twitching, but none of them moved again. In the center of it all stood Alira, her body trembling, her glow dim. Her breathing was shallow, but she was still standing. Beside her, Mason lay on the floor, unconscious, his weapon broken, his armor cracked, his face pale, but he was alive. Alira knelt beside him, placed her hand over his chest. For a moment, she had no energy left to give. But something deeper stirred inside her, not strength, but something stronger. Her hand glowed faintly again, not from power, but from hope. She focused everything she had left into him. Minutes passed, or maybe hours, and then Mason coughed, eyes blinking open slowly. Alira, he whispered. I'm here, she replied, her voice almost a breath. He smiled weakly. We made it. They sat in silence, surrounded by the ruins of the battle. The bunker was no longer a safe place. It had served its purpose. Now it was just a tomb for machines and memories. Alira reached into her belt and activated the beacon. A small blue light blinked in her palm. The signal was sent to anyone who could still hear. Not to bring more war, but to ask for peace. I never thought I'd press this, she said. And I never thought I'd fall for someone who wasn't even from my planet. Mason replied. She looked at him, her lips curling into a faint smile. Funny how survival rewrites the rules. 2 days later, the sky changed. A sleek alien ship cut through the clouds, not a war vessel, but a rescue craft. Alira's people had answered. But they didn't come with weapons. They came with eyes wide and hands open. The first thing they saw was Alira holding Mason up as he limped out of the bunker. A human and an alien together, not as enemies, but as something new. The soldiers paused, unsure what to do, until Alira stepped forward and said, "He's under my protection." No one questioned her after that. Mason was taken aboard, treated with care. They scanned his injuries, offered food, warmth, and safety. Alira refused to leave his side, even when her commanders asked her to return. "I made my choice," she said firmly, "and he's part of it." The next few weeks were quiet. They flew above the ruined earth, scanning for more survivors. Some were found both human and alien wounded, afraid, but still alive. Alira and Mason visited each site together, and slowly, the story of what happened in the bunker began to spread. Not a story of war, but of unity, not one of hatred. But healing, some rejected it, some didn't understand, but others listened. And from that small crack in the wall between species, something new began to grow. Months passed. The skies over Earth began to clear. Ash fell less often. The winds carried voices again. Not screams. Mason stood on the edge of a new outpost, built where the bunker once stood. Alira stood beside him, her hand in his. They were no longer just survivors. They were a symbol of what could happen when fear was set aside, when two broken hearts dared to trust each other. "I never thought I'd call this home," Mason said. Alira leaned closer. "It's not about where we are," she whispered. "It's about who we're with." And as the sun rose over a scarred but healing world, a human and an alien stood together, not as enemies, not as strangers, but as the beginning of something far greater, a future together.